Hello, welcome back to my channel. Alyssa here, and today I'm gonna set up for the new year. Before I get too far into things, I just want to remind you, if you like bullet journaling content, if you want to see what I'm up to in future months, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you can check back in. For my new bullet journals, I'm gonna do the same thing I did last year, where I put my yearly spreads in one of these little Tomoe River paper notebooks. This one is Taroko brand, and it feels a little bit different than the one I had last year, so I don't know if I had a different brand last year or if they just changed their covers. But the paper inside is the same, it's just the cover that's different. All I've put in here so far is this little grid to kind of measure sizing on the front page, and it's a tool to help me figure out, for example, if I want 7 items to be evenly spaced on the page, what does that look like and how many squares is each space, things like that. So my yearly spreads are going to go in here, and then for my daily and monthlies, I am going to put them in a slightly fatter notebook. I couldn't find the Taroko Breeze on Amazon this year, so I got this one. It's called The Author. I don't know much about this brand or about this notebook, I just know it has Tomoe River paper in it and it's about the size that I wanted. It seems high quality and the paper inside is of course Tomoe River paper, so that I'm pretty confident is going to be the same. But we'll get to that one in a minute. First I'm going to set up my yearly spreads. I'm not doing much in the way of yearly setup because I don't want to overwhelm myself. I don't want to try and track too much at once. And so pretty much what I'm going to put in here is just my goals, trackers for my 2020 goals, and then a couple of year-long trackers that I picked out very specifically. In my previous video, I went through and I narrowed down all my goals. I ended up with 15. There's 18 listed on this page, but some of them have canceled next to them and some of them have had the numbers tweaked a little bit. So off camera, I went through these and simplified them. I got them down to kind of the core of the goal, and I'm gonna copy those simplified goals over into my 2020 goal spread. And I haven't actually put them in priority order on this page. I've put them in an order that makes most sense for tracking. So what you're going to see is the one-off goals where I just do a thing and check it off. Those are going to be near the top. And then as we get more and more complicated in the tracking of the goal, like goals that have more pieces to them, I'm going to put those down lower, and then I'm going to have 3 special spreads to track specific goals, and I'll talk about those more as I get to them. As far as decoration goes, I didn't want this to be too complicated because there's going to be a lot of information on this page, and I'm always wary of creating cluttered spreads, things that have too much going on. So the decorations for this page are going to be very simple. I'm doing a header with my new Flex pen. This is a Conklin Duraflex or Duragraph with an Omniflex nib. I'm not entirely sure what the actual name of this pen is. It says Duraflex on it, so that's probably right. But I have in here a nice shimmering ink. It's Diamine Mystique. So it's like a purple ink with a gold shimmer. It looks very cool. The only thing is the pen does have some issues with hard starts where it won't write right away when you write with it. So I do have a scrap paper just off screen that I use to kind of get it going. So I've done that header, and then for each goal I'm numbering it to make it easier to track. And I'm just going to be color coding these with my Tombow dual brush pens. Most of these are from the pastel pack, which I really like. I just like the colors to be kind of muted. I don't need bright neon like highlighters staring out at me every time I open this page. And so for the sake of the color coding here, I have this coral color for game development, this pink color for writing and reading, I have a blue for health goals, purple for kind of community goals, so my YouTube and my Skillshare goals both go under this, and then I have a gray for money goals. And next to each goal, I have circles to fill in, and it's kind of hard to see what I'm doing before I've written in what the goal actually is, but I went through ahead of time and I looked at how many like different pieces each goal has. Some of them are very simple, like complete a draft of my Nano 2019 novel is just one thing. Write 4 short stories is 4 things, and that gets 4 circles. But there are certain goals that were technically one-off goals if you thought about them that way, like reach net worth 0 is one of my goals. But if I just track it kind of separately and then just check it off when it's done, there's not a lot of traceability there. So what I'm going to get to on the next page is actually a monthly tracker for some of the relevant goals. And I did use a Micron pen to create these circles and also to write in the numbering. And the reason for this is that fountain pens, which I typically use, won't write on top of Tombow dual brush pens. There's something about the way it sits on the page that makes fountain pens bleed really bad. So I use a Micron on those, and then I also use a Micron for the circles because once Microns dry, they are waterproof. So I can fill in these circles however I want to. I can use Tombows, I can use fountain pen, I can use watercolor even if I want to. It just gives me a lot more options. But I did want to make full use of my Flex pen, so I have written in all the names of the goals with the Flex pen with the shimmering ink, and I'll try to get a good shot of that shimmer up on the screen. It is very difficult to photograph and like get on video, which is funny because it's like so obvious in person. And as I worked on the right side of this spread, I did put down a paper towel because the Flex pen does write very wet. It takes a very long time to dry because it puts down so much ink at once. And also the shimmer, even when it is dry, can smudge if you just put your hand on it. And that's something I always have to be aware of with fountain pens, even inks that have been drying for a very long time. On this smooth Tomoe River paper, the oils and the kind of wetness from your hand, like just because it has skin on it, can smudge ink even after it's dried. So that's what I have there. For the right side of this page, I talked about it very briefly, but I have a monthly tracker for some of my goals. So what I'm doing here is I'm just putting 12 boxes down the side of the page. I did these in gray because I didn't want the colors on this page to get too crazy. And then I'm just using the Micron to outline all these boxes and write in each of the months. I added the number of the month and the like abbreviated name just for clarity. And the goals I'm tracking on this monthly spread are anything that I felt like I would need to keep track of it throughout the entire year in order to accomplish it. So this includes my 10 hours per month of game development goal for our game company, my net worth. I'm just going to write down my net worth every month. Charity, I haven't decided if I'm going to put the amount total up until that month or just the amount that I donated within that month, but once I decide, I'll just have to make sure I'm consistent. And then I also have my bench press weight, my squat weight, and my deadlift weight. If I'm following my goal, I will be working out regularly throughout the year. So in order to get these numbers, I should just have to use the weight from the last workout I did, and I do track my workouts with an app that I use. It's called Jeffit or GFit. It's with a JEFIT. I'm still kind of trying this out, so I'm not like 100% endorsing this app, but it does seem fairly useful to me. But the point of all this is just that I won't have to go and do like a separate strength test in order to get these numbers, which I think would make it a little bit unwieldy. Instead, I'll just use the most recent numbers and plop those in there. And then, as I mentioned, I do track my time regularly with a different app. called Jiffy. So that's two very similar app names, which is kind of strange, but I use Jiffy just habitually, so that won't be a problem. And then I track my money with Mint. So all of these numbers are going to be tracked digitally elsewhere using processes I already have. And when I'm keeping track of them month to month, I'll just have to copy them into this spread. It was a little bit tedious to write all of this in for the whole year, but I think it will be pretty easy to fill in now that I've done it. And it wasn't too crazy, it wasn't quite as bad as doing like a year at a glance calendar type spread. But I'll just skip ahead through all of this and get to the good part, which is adding a little bit of metallic watercolor. I love this stuff. I love shimmer of all kinds, as you could probably guess. I just added some silver sort of for flavor, so I added it around the two spreads, and then I also just added it to the edge of all my goals for just a little bit of fun. And now we're getting into the goals that really have a lot of pieces to them. And the first one is going to be on this left page, which is my book goals, which I have two. Read 30 books, 10 of which are new releases, and then also do close readings or like an analysis of 6 of those books. So for this, I wanted to do like a more traditional book spread. So it's going to be just a list of books that I've read. I'm going to put a checkbox. If it's one I did a close reading for, I'm going to put an asterisk next to it. And I made a sort of terrible stylistic choice for this page that like carried on to the next page just to keep things consistent. And it has to do with what I mentioned at the beginning of this video, which was you cannot write with fountain pens on top of Tombow dual brush pens because they will bleed really badly. The ink will just kind of like spread out over the top of the pen until it's like almost unreadable. So what I did in order to get kind of like an alternating line background going was I realized that you can write with fountain pen on top of colored pencil. So instead of just taking my gray Tombow and highlighting every other line, I took a colored pencil and I colored in every other line, which is a lot more work. And for some reason, when I started, I didn't think it would be like kind of ridiculous. And I realized almost immediately that it was a lot of work and my hands were hurting. But I felt like once I started, I couldn't just leave half of the page highlighted like that. So I just kept going. And then the next spread also has a list of items. And since they're both like on the same spread, I felt like I had to do it there too. So that's I guess my excuse for why my colored pencil filling gets so sloppy is because my hands were hurting and I just wanted it to be done. It does look very nice. I am kind of pleased with how it turned out visually, but I would not recommend this unless you just have a lot of time on your hands and you love filling things in with colored pencil. But that's really all there is to both of these spreads. I just have a big long list. I have 30 lines for my book list, but my next and final goal is to make 40 pieces of 3D art. And since these pages only have 40 squares, like in the whole page, I actually split that one into 2 columns of 20. And that's pretty much it. As I complete these, I'm just gonna fill in, if it's a book, I'm gonna fill in what book it was and who it was by, and I may even give them ratings. I haven't really kept up with that in the past, but it might be nice to keep track of which books I really liked. And then for my 3D art, I just want to talk about this a little bit more. Like, it occurred to me that people may not know what it is I'm really setting out to do. When I say 3D art, I really just mean like a 3D object or a 3D character. I don't really mean like an entire scene or what many people would consider like a full art piece. It's really more about creating assets for games. So what these pieces might be is like some sort of furniture that you would put in a game, or a character, or an animal, or, some kind of decorative clutter like a stack of books or a candlestick or something. I haven't really thought about what I'm gonna do for all of these, and I probably should do a little bit of brainstorming so I don't go into this year and just be completely lost and not do anything, because right now that might be what will happen. But the standards for these are going to be pretty low because I am somewhat experienced with 3D art, but I'm out of practice. So I'll need to ease into it, kind of get a feel for what I like to do and what I want to do. And then as some game development kicks in, as we get started on this new project we're working on, I will have like actual things that we need. And I figure I can use those for this goal. That might be cheating, because it would kind of hit two goals at once. But, they're my goals. I can fill them in however I want to. So we'll see how all this goes, but I just wanted to give a little bit more information for people who might be kind of confused. My next yearly spread is going to be 2 yearly trackers, and I love these. I love the idea of them, but I have been pretty bad at filling them in for the entire year. So I wanted to keep these both as things that would be very useful to me, so they're not kind of just extra garbage that I'm putting in here. And also, to some extent, I can fill these in retroactively, so I have this information. I don't need to necessarily update it every single day, which always helps with kind of keeping up these long-term spreads. And so on the left side of this page, I'm going to do my meditation tracker that I mentioned in my goal planning video. And then on the right, I'm going to do a dual tracker. So I'm going to track two things. It's going to be sleep and headaches. And I think, I may be wrong, but I think all of the things on this whole spread are going to be somewhat connected. I think that meditation will affect my sleep and frequency of headaches. I could be wrong, but the idea here is to just have all of this information in one place so that I can identify patterns, I'm gonna speed through a lot of this because it's not very interesting. I did add this little watercolor swirly doodle thing. I was just kind of painting. I picked purples and blues specifically because I felt like those embodied the idea of relaxing, meditating, sleeping. I didn't pick a color that I thought would fit headaches because I don't want to stress myself out. So I just kind of painted these swirly designs. I used some purples and some blues, and then I added on some metallic watercolor on top of it, just kind of highlighting the edges, just an abstract little thing. I filled in the actual tracker with microns, and I kind of went a little bit overboard with this. I could have left it just kind of blank on the inside and then filled in each square as I went, but I decided to separate each month with a line and then also denote the weeks with lines. I just find it's easier for me to tell that I'm filling in the right square if I can see the edges of the week, if that makes sense. This was pretty time consuming to do. I had to have a calendar up that I was referencing constantly, and then as I did the second one, I made a bunch of mistakes because I was trying to copy the first one rather than looking at the calendar again, and because they're so far apart, it was hard for me to visually keep my place as I looked back and forth between the two trackers. So it's definitely not something that you need to do, and if you don't like kind of tedious journaling like this, I would recommend just make the big block and fill it in. Don't bother with all these little lines, but I think it will be helpful for me. And in order to get two things on my second tracker, typically you just fill in the squares with a color, and that's what you're tracking. But in order to get, more bang for my buck, so to speak, I'm going to use the color fill to count my sleep. And then if I had a headache that day, I'm gonna do an X over the top of it. If you want to get a little bit more granular with this, you can do different shapes for like different things. Like, for example, if I wanted to track like really tiny headaches compared to like really, really bad ones, I can make a series of symbols and just put the right one in for each day. And I could extend things that way, but I'm not too concerned about intensity. It seems to be kind of random for me, but I don't know. You can extend these sorts of trackers in a lot of different ways, and they're just kind of fun to look at when you have them all filled in. And the very last yearly spread that I'm doing, it takes just a couple seconds to set up, and that is my currently inked spread. And because this is going to be filled with all sorts of different fountain pen colors and like a bunch of writing and different squares of like color swatches, I'm not going to put anything on this page except a divider. The way that I do these is I write the date of when that pen was filled on the left side of this divider. On the right side, I write what pen it is, what color ink it is. I do a couple of little like swatches. When I refill that pen with something else, I draw a little X next to it in the new color. So this spread is really going to fill up once I start using it, but for now I just have a title and these divider lines. Last year's spread took up almost exactly 2 pages, so I just made 2 pages for this year as well, and we'll see how it goes. Very easy and very useful. So there's my year setup for 2020. Just a couple of spreads. I'm gonna really focus in on what I think is important this year and not try to track a whole bunch of extra stuff. So really I just have my goals, this one set of trackers, and my currently inked, and that's all I need. I had debated making my January setup a separate video, but because it is December 30th when I'm editing this, which also happens to be my birthday, yay for me, I didn't want to spend tomorrow editing as well. Like, I already have everything filmed, I'm just gonna stick it in this video and call it good. So let's move over to that journal. The author, as I mentioned, I did realize only just now, like pulling it out to actually put things in it, that it is a little bit thinner. Not thinner like number of pages, but like the width of the book is thinner, kind of like the traveler's notebooks are, though I don't think it's quite that extreme, which was not intentional. I would prefer the full like A5 size that the Taroko Breeze had. I might try to dig a little bit deeper and figure out where I can buy those for when this notebook is filled up, but for now, I'm just rolling with it. And my January spread is also going to be fairly simple. What I've done already is just go in and pencil in what I want these spreads to look like. I did something kind of fun with the headers where I looked at like kind of decorative fonts on the internet and tried to sketch them down. The first thing I want to talk about is my overall plans for January. I thought a lot about this, thinking of getting my year off to a good start. And so for that reason, what I've done is broken out my goals into like what will I need to get done within January in order to kind of stay on track with all of these. I made the decision to tackle some of my goals and not other ones. And the big goal that I have for January is to do my first cut, so my first calorie deficit for, I can't actually remember if I decided it would be 10 weeks or 8 weeks. 8 weeks is definitely easier, but I think I wrote down 10. I should probably stick to what I've written down. But anyway, it's gonna start in January. I'm going to track all of the food I'm eating, and I'm gonna aim for a deficit every day. What I'm also gonna do that I've kind of been playing with the idea of doing, and I'm kind of like scared to commit to it, but I just went ahead and did it, is cut out added sugar and caffeine in the month of January. This should help with my my nutrition goals. It should help with, I mean, all kinds of stuff really. Sugar is like poison and I know that, but I love it. So I'm going to stop eating sugar. And I really am a cold turkey kind of person. I don't do well with moderation. I do much better if I know something is not good for me. I do better just cutting it out completely. Even if it is just for a month, it is so much better for me than if I try to moderate it and immediately fail, because my brain isn't really wired to think about things that way. So, I'm gonna talk about this spread in a little bit, but I started with the header on the right side just because I am left-handed. So if I start on the left and move to the right, I would end up dragging my hand right through everything or writing at a weird angle to avoid it. And one thing I noticed almost immediately is that this notebook does not really lay flat. The front cover wants to like come up all the time, which is not my favorite, but it's not the end of the world, so I'll just deal with it. First thing I did was write in all of my goals, and I made these nice diamonds to fill in once I've completed them. And the way that I broke these down, the 6 goals that I have set for January are to complete 3 3D art pieces, do my 10 hours of game company work. This fitness thing where I cut out sugar and caffeine is going to be my first life experiment, so I'm going to be kind of recording my feelings and vlogging about it as I go, and then we're gonna see like where that gets me at the end of it. My next goal is to do yoga twice, read 2 books, and hopefully, I've been saying this for a few months, but publish my second Skillshare course. Again, it's almost done. I just really haven't worked on it. I was gonna say I didn't have time, but I definitely have had time. I've been playing a lot of video games these past few days. Like, the time between Christmas and New Year's always feels like such a slog for me. My sleep schedule is totally messed up. I've been sleeping till like noon every day, which is gross. I would like to get that done in January, kind of get back into the productive swing of things. And then below my goals, I added in these 5 boxes for the 5 weeks of January to just like journal about how I'm doing, just to keep me on track. And then my right page, which I have titled Getting Swole. Swole is like slang for getting really buff, and I love it. I love to use it like ironically but not ironically, because I totally mean it. But this is gonna act sort of as a habit tracker. I'm not gonna track any other habits, just the ones that are related to this fitness goal. And so I have 2 columns here. The one on the left is gonna be like habits. So I have here a section to put my yoga, strength exercises, protein and calorie goals. I'm not going to worry about fat and carbs because I'm just not worried about that as much. Protein is really what matters when it comes to building muscle, so that's going to be my focus. And then overall calories are more for like gaining or losing weight. So that's yoga, strength workout, protein, calories, and then no sugar and no caffeine. I would like to be perfect throughout the entire month. I expect I will probably slip up once or twice, and so I want to make sure I track that and don't let it get crazy. And then next to the habits, I'm gonna have a little space to just put how I'm feeling, because when I cut calories, I usually get very grumpy, I get very like frustrated, and this is gonna be a place where I can write my feelings down. And it's also gonna make it easier to do the like experiment vlog if I'm keeping track of all of this stuff day to day. If I miss a vlogging day, like if I don't get my feelings on camera, I still want to keep track of them so I can talk about them. So that's that spread. Pretty simple. Gotta do my goals and I gotta follow my fitness plan, my nutrition plan. I didn't really decorate these spreads very much, partially because I couldn't think of anything that I felt like doing. I had been setting up journals for a couple hours at this point, so I was just like done with journaling. But also the nice pink headers, I felt like added some nice color to the page, and I didn't really think it needed very much else. And my next spread, I mentioned this was a very simple month, and it is my gratitude tracker on the left side. And then on the right side, just to even things out, I added this daily action tracker. But what I want to put on this right spread is what daily action I took to get closer to my goals. Ideally, every single day of the month will have something, even if it's some very small thing like oh, I read a couple pages out of a book, or I spent an hour working on 3D art or something. Like, there is a time to rest and there's a time to kind of play and not do anything at all. But I think most days of the month, if I want to meet my goals, I will have to do something, you know? So, gratitude tracker, pretty straightforward, daily action tracker, and that's really it for January. I didn't want to overload myself. Like I said, I felt like the fitness goals are gonna take up most of my energy just through sheer willpower. I love food. I love very junky food. So a big part of my month is just gonna be focused on sticking to those goals, and I don't really need a bunch of extra stuff to track. So there it is. There is my setup for the new year 2020 and the setup for January. Let me know in the comments what your goals are for January, and we can all keep each other accountable. I love setting goals, even if they often end up being a little bit out of my reach just because they are so ambitious. But I feel like I'm getting a little bit closer each month, each year to things I can accomplish and like a reasonable amount of goals, but I do still benefit from that accountability. So let me know, check back in, and we'll all bust out our goals for 2020. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. The pace of my video posting will probably drop down quite a bit. I've been posting a lot this month as I get through all of this planning. I'm gonna get back into the swing of work. I'm gonna start tackling these goals. And so my next video will probably be my February plan with me. The life experiment for Q1 will probably be in February or maybe March if I decide to do it for the full 8 or 10 weeks. But I'll keep you posted. Check me out on Instagram for smaller updates, and I hope to see you next time. Thanks again. Bye.